This week in Texas, we sit down for a lengthy conversation about D.C. politics with Houston Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher.
What we're seeing right now in the Congress is that Congress is not doing its job. Congress is not asserting itself against a very aggressive executive branch.
And we talk about the Hill with Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw.
So that it really depends on who's getting fired and whether people think it's a good idea. I think, in my opinion, generally, you have to let some of it shake out.
Plus, we take a look at the demonstrations against a pair of bills in the State House.
We can no longer forget our history because it will repeat itself.
And our political insiders offer their perspective this week in Texas. Hello again, I'm Tom Abrams. Thanks for joining us. This week in Texas, we sit down with two members of the Texas congressional delegation, one Democrat and one Republican, to get an update on the lightning-fast environment under the new White House administration. But we begin this week with legislation in Austin. Demonstrators in Dallas, Austin, and in Houston held rallies this past week protesting a pair of bills that would restrict or ban real estate ownership by some foreign nationals. Authors of the bill say they protect national security against hostile interests. Those rallying say the measures are merely discrimination. Dozens gathered on a humid Sunday to protest legislation that would prevent governments, companies, and certain foreign nationals from owning private property in Texas.
We also stand with our Asian brothers and sisters against any bill that is discriminatory. Any bill that's a prelude to worse.
The bill does not name a particular country and does not apply to legal permanent residents. Still, it's a concern for those who think it could lead to even stricter laws.
So this is, once again, a repeated attack on our community, passing laws that were ruled unconstitutional like 80 years ago that were passed against Japanese Americans during World War II.
Those were called alien land laws, and the Supreme Court outlawed them in 1962. There are matching bills in the state legislature this year. House Bill 17 has 56 sponsors. All of them are Republican. It is scheduled for a public hearing in Austin on Thursday, April 2nd. The Senate's version has already passed on March 19th, 24-7.
We can no longer forget our history because it will repeat itself.
Everybody needs to speak up and stand up for one another.
For more on the legislation, we want to sit down and talk with our panel of political insiders, Otis Avagaru and Jessica Colon. We appreciate you being with us. Your thoughts about this legislation. Jessica, we'll start with you. Your thoughts about whether or not this is actually discriminatory legislation, or is it really in the name of state security?
This legislation is absolutely in the vein of state security and also national security. 22 other states have passed legislation similar to this. It's no secret that when we talk about adversaries that have made moves on taking and buying land here in the United States, China's on that list, and it certainly is known that they had, entities that had ties with the Chinese Communist Party purchased land near military bases here in our own Texas, Valverde, Texas, I believe, and it certainly has happened in other states across the country. And so we've seen states start to take action to make sure, codify that this can't take place, and to do what we can to make sure that those that have ties with bad actors don't access our land, our rare earth minerals, our water supply, and other things that we need to sustain our own residents and citizens here of Texas and of our country. So this is a real thing that is happening out there, and I'm glad to see Texas and our legislators take a lead in bringing legislation forward. Again, I just want to say, before I kick it over back to you, that it can still be toughened up, though. We've seen legislation come forward in previous sessions. I'm very grateful for it. I think that good work has been done to strengthen it and make it even more constitutionally sound, but there is still work to do to get it to where it really is ironclad.
And notice it has passed the Senate already. It has several dozen sponsors in the House. Your thoughts about the legislation?
Yeah, it's just another overreach by the Republican legislators, here in Texas. Another solution in search of a problem. Listen, the problem with these bills, first and foremost, is that they lack specifics, and there could be real unintended consequences targeting law-abiding, productive residents here in Texas and based on their national of origin. Like these are the things that make Texas become ridiculous in the nation's eye, right? Like, and then also let's talk about how this could possibly violate constitutional protections related to equal protection and non-discrimination. And it's going to specifically target Asian American communities. We've seen this happen not just across the country, but here in Texas. And even this is based off of stuff that started with COVID, right? Seeing Asian hate rise amongst people. And then let's talk about the economic impact it could have on Texas. It's going to discourage foreign investment here in Texas. It's going to hinder international business relations. And think about the immigrants that are here in Texas that solely survive on their entrepreneurship and their small businesses and these things that they came to Texas for Texas being business friendly. Listen, if we want to do stuff like this, let's just advocate for narrow targeted measures that specifically address actual security threats rather than like overly broad and nationality based bans. I mean, it's ridiculous. Texas is supposed to be welcoming. We're supposed to be inclusive. We're supposed to be economically dynamic. And when you have policies like this, that's the opposite of our values here of fairness and equal opportunity here in Texas. I mean, it just makes us look ridiculous in the nation's eyes, and we can be better as Texas. And we shouldn't be passing unconstitutional laws to do that.
Tom,
Go ahead.
That is not what this bill is about. Okay, this bill specifically, the Senate bill in particular, says it prohibits foreign governmental entities, companies, and individuals from purchasing private property if they're in countries identified in the latest annual threat assessment reports by the Director of National Intelligence. So we have to be very clear about what we're talking about, and we can't have our head in the sand about it. And let's face it, this was a bipartisan bill out of the Senate. We had 7 Democrats vote for this legislation. 4 of the 5 senators along the border voted for this, including 3 Democrats. So we have to be real about what is happening and acknowledge what is actually happening. So we're not talking about citizens of the United States. We're talking about bad actors here. And I do think that this bill still could be toughened up in the House, and hopefully it comes to conference and gets passed and gets done here. So this has a—
And Jessica, that's not what I said. I mean, we're talking about the same thing. This wasn't about targeting citizens. What I'm saying is that there could be citizens that could be targeted because of unintended consequences of these bills. We have to make sure that we're doing that. We've seen that all around the country already. Innocent people who are citizens, who are law-abiding, are getting swept up by ICE. This is a real thing in our country. When we're passing laws and there's unintended consequences to it, we have to make sure that we're also providing solutions to that. That's really important here. And just because Democrats or Republicans vote for bills doesn't mean that they agree on them. I mean, there's a broad coalition of Republicans, there's a broad coalition of Democrats that vote on bills all the time in the Texas legislature. Jessica, I think you'd be the first to say, you know what? I wish my Republican rep didn't vote for that Democratic bill. So yes, it's great to be in the bipartisan nature of things, but we also have to make sure that we're not just demonizing and punishing innocent people who will be impacted and affected by this bill.
Jessica Otis, I appreciate your time as always. Thanks for joining us remotely for This Week in Texas. When we come back, we'll have a conversation with 2 members of Congress, Dan Crenshaw and Lizzie Fletcher. I'm joined now by Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher. We're talking about what's going on in Congress. And in speaking with your staff ahead of our interview, they indicated to me that the way you feel about Congress right now is that it's not normal. What do you mean?
Well, that's exactly right. It's not normal, and it's not good, Tom. This is my 4th term in Congress. I've been in different situations, but what we're seeing right now in the Congress is that Congress is not doing its job. Congress is not asserting itself against a very aggressive executive branch. You know, we got 3 branches of government. Congress is the first one. The executive branch is the second. Courts are the third. We have seen an absolute power grab from the White House. And I'm hearing about it from my constituents all the time about the speed and the volume of things that this administration is doing. And Congress is basically letting it happen. And not just letting it happen, kind of cheering it on, cutting programs that are absolutely essential to people who live and work in our community and across the country. People are really worried about what's happening, and Congress is not doing its job of exercising oversight and making sure that we exercise the things that when we do the things we're sent there to do. We have the power of the purse. We're supposed to set the budget. We're supposed to direct the spending. Congress isn't doing those things. They're just letting the White House, President Trump, and Elon Musk do it all.
So how is this different then when Democrats have the White House and control of both houses, and they can kind of set the agenda? What's different about this?
Well, it's different than agenda setting. Certainly you look to leadership and partnership with the White House when they're in the same party. But what we're seeing here is the White House taking over basic congressional functions like congressional appropriations. And you hear the chair of the Appropriations Committee say, appropriations aren't the law, they're just advisory. Appropriations is what it means to set the budget. It's Congress's job. It's supposed to start in the House of Representatives, and it is the law. We have passed bills that have been signed into law that say how the money is supposed to be spent. And instead of spending the money that way or coming back to Congress and explaining why not, they are literally taking a chainsaw to programs, closing departments that Congress established that cannot be closed, right? So you see a lot of legal challenges. That's the third branch. And right now we're seeing the courts are the only ones that are stopping the administration.
And I heard the speaker mention the possibility of defunding some federal districts, given that they have the power or at least the money to do that. Is that something you see actually happening, or is that just a threat?
Well, there are a lot of threats. I don't know what will actually happen, but that is certainly not something that should happen, right? And that's what I mean by it's not normal and it's not good. What we're seeing here is an absolute march toward authoritarianism, and there's no other way to say it. And you know, Tom, that I've been working hard to work with people on both sides of the aisle the entire time I've been in Congress. But we are seeing the legislative branch cede its authority and let the White House do whatever it wants. And what the White House wants to do is not good. Now, certainly, I think we can all agree that government isn't working for everybody, and we need to make some changes, and we need to figure things out. But the way they're going about doing it is not okay. Whether it is giving Elon Musk unfettered access to all of our data, which is absolutely terrifying to people in my district and across the country. We're hearing that from everybody. To messing with Social Security, messing with Medicaid, messing with these critical functions, freezing funds. I know a lot of people here have experienced it, that freezing funds for programs that people here rely on, whether it's Meals on Wheels or Head Start or the Refugee Resettlement Program, just cutting off the funds with no warning. In my district, I've heard from so many people who are concerned about cutting the National Weather Service, right? They're talking about cuts to the National Weather Service and NOAA that we rely on for hurricane preparedness and that everybody relies on for data of all kinds. They're also talking, of course, about cutting FEMA and doing it overnight and doing it without substantive and meaningful input. And I don't want to go on a long tangent here, but I'll just say we have always wanted to make sure that we're doing things well throughout our history. And there have been multiple commissions in different administrations to make government more efficient. There's nothing wrong with that. I have said since I've been elected that our district wants government to be efficient, effective, and ethical. And those things are absolutely true. But that's not what we're getting from this administration. You can look back to the Clinton administration where they had a program to really look at government efficiency. You can go back to the Truman administration and the Eisenhower administration where former President Herbert Hoover came in and ran programs to address government efficiency, especially after World War II, making sure that government was doing the things it should be doing and the right size, right? And what was different there was that those commissions made recommendations. They brought in people with actual expertise. And unfortunately, we've seen there are a lot of people in this administration who have no expertise, and it is putting our country at risk. They brought in people to talk about substantively ways that things could be improved and changed. And then they made recommendations to Congress and the president. And Congress voted on them. And they implemented, not all of them, but many of them. So there are ways to do this. And those things are not being undertaken. Instead, we've just given all this power Or Donald Trump has given all this power to Elon Musk, who has literally held up a chainsaw and said this is what he wants to do with the government.
So you would acknowledge that there is likely government bloat or waste somewhere, and it's not the getting rid of the expense that you have an issue with so much as it is the way it's being done, that Congress is being cut out of the equation when it's Congress's constitutional ability to fund or defund programs.
Well, it's Congress's constitutional duty, and I hear every year from my constituents what programs they want funded, what kinds of things. I mean, certainly in my district, we have a lot of people who do cutting-edge research through the National Institutes of Health. I'm always supporting money and funding for those projects. We're so proud of the work that gets done here at the Texas Medical Center and across our region. And that kind of stuff, we go in and we say, these are things that we should be funding. All kinds of programs. I already mentioned Meals on Wheels, Head Start, all kinds of things that we want to see happen. But beyond that, I think we need to know. We keep hearing from Elon Musk, from Donald Trump, from Republicans in Congress that there's fraud, waste, and abuse. But we see no evidence of exactly what they're talking about. They're not actually showing us. They're making claims with no supporting evidence. And the other thing that's really important about what they're doing is there are mechanisms in place to look for those things. For example, in all of these agencies, there are inspector generals that come in that are responsible for receiving these kinds of claims. Trump came in and fired them when he first got there, the people responsible for looking for those things. And you have to ask why. Why would you come in and fire all of the inspectors general that are supposed to be looking for these things? Of course we know, because there are cases that are prosecuted for fraud against the government, whether it is taking advantage during the COVID pandemic or Medicaid fraud or Medicare fraud. And those cases get prosecuted by the Department of Justice. But they've also fired those people at the Department of Justice that prosecute those cases. And so what you're seeing is this wholesale destruction of the people and systems in place to address these that have substantive knowledge and experience. And you're replacing them with people who don't have the expertise that we should have in making those decisions. And I have to say, we saw it recently. We saw on display how dangerous it is to have people who don't have the requisite expertise in charge. And we saw that with the whole Signalgate situation and with the Secretary of Defense putting classified information, operational information on a Signal chat where he'd invited a reporter, or where someone had invited a reporter into the chat, and they didn't even know the reporter was on there. So we are all at risk. That put our soldiers and airmen at risk. It puts our whole country at risk when we don't have qualified people in these hugely important jobs making decisions that all of us will live with for decades and generations.
Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher, thanks so much for your time. This Week in Texas, we'll be right back. Welcome back to This Week in Texas. I'm joined now by Republican Congressman Dan Crenshaw. He's joining us from Washington. Congressman, thanks for being with us.
Hey, great to be with you, Tom.
So let's talk about House Resolution 262 and your effort to have essentially a war on the Mexican cartels, basically led by Congress. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so look, everybody likes to talk tough on the cartels, and it's a bipartisan issue. Even Democrats have been very helpful in our cartel task force over the past couple of years. What's needed now is legislative focus. So the issue with the cartels spans across a bunch of different committees of jurisdiction, right? Because you got the DOJ, you've got the Homeland Security, you got the Armed Services, you've got the intelligence community. And I haven't even gone through really a lot of committees yet, but that's already pretty overwhelming. And it's pretty obvious to anyone listening that all of those different entities will have some kind of focus on cartels within the agencies themselves, but Congress has no focus. So none of these committees of jurisdiction focus on cartels or in any strategic way. This would fix that. You need to hire staff that can put into legislation a lot of the ideas that we researched and came up with on the task force. A select committee is a great way to do that. We're running into problems actually getting it done for some reason. Again, it's a little mind-blowing because, again, everybody likes to talk tough about it. Oh, yeah, we're focused on cartels, but they're really not. Very few members have ever gone to Mexico to actually research this. And it's just, it doesn't, I want to put our money where our mouth is. That's the point of that resolution, to create that select committee.
So what powers would the select committee have, and ballpark, how much would you need to get started?
We're only talking about a few $1 million here. And as far as powers, I mean, typical power of a committee, but without the legislative jurisdiction, it won't report legislation to the floor. But there is, just like the China Select Committee. So that's a good roadmap for how to do this. Didn't take away other chairmen's jurisdiction. I wouldn't have gotten 17 other chairmen to co-sponsor the legislation, by the way, if it had done that. But a lot still would sign it probably, actually, because they realize that they don't have the resources themselves to focus on the issue. So no, it reports or recommends legislation that then have to go through a committee of jurisdiction. But that's okay, and there comes with that a little bit more authority than just some of us trying to put it into write the legislation ourselves with our personal staff. We just don't have the staff, and that's really what it comes down to.
Speaking of staff and a lot going on the Hill, there is a reduction of the federal workforce going on right now. One of many, fronts on which the Trump administration is attacking what it sees as bloat or waste. From your perspective, how is this being received on Capitol Hill?
Definitely mixed, and it definitely depends on who's getting fired. As far as whether it infringes on Congress's powers, to that question, I don't think that's true, right? He's not firing people from the legislative branch. He's firing people who work directly for the president, and that's everybody in the executive branch. Turns out there's a lot of them. So that it really depends on who's getting fired and whether people think it's a good idea. I think, in my opinion, generally, you have to let some of it shake out. There's definitely some concerns. We saw a ton of FDA employees getting let go today. We're not sure who they are or why they're being let go. We just don't have a lot of answers. It could be a good idea. There could be waste there. It could be that these employees weren't doing anything at all. I don't know. It could also mean that there's going to be consequences, in getting drugs and medical devices approved because there's less people to do it. We don't know yet. So it really does depend.
You've not shied away from being critical of some in your party. You praise people when they do well. You criticize them when they don't. Your thoughts about how the first couple months of this administration has played out as it relates specifically to DOGE?
I don't know about DOGE. I will say just generally, President Trump, he makes good on his campaign promises. So nothing should be a surprise here. As far as wins, especially for Texans, I think the border is such a massive win. I mean, he got that solved in like 5 minutes. That took almost no time at all. DOGE just remains to be seen because they're not communicating with us. So I don't know how to defend them or not defend them. I just really don't. I've seen some consequences of it, and cabinet secretaries really in the end have to go in and make those decisions themselves. So, I always point out to people, DOGE doesn't fire anyone. They make a recommendation to the president. The president has the cabinet secretaries actually do the firing. The president is still the president. So whether it's DOGE or Elon Musk, is he an advisor to the president? Yes, but he doesn't just fire people without that authority given to him. I just point that out to folks.
Your thoughts on the general scope of things on Capitol Hill right now? Does it feel different than it did under the last administration?
Well, of course. I mean, every day is a new day, and every political scenario is a new one. Feels like since I got elected in 2018 that we've had monumental, historic moments like every few minutes in this new world. And so it's no different now. But there's lots more positivity on the Republican side. Obviously, we won the House, the Senate, and the presidency. But now it's time to govern. So still a lot to do on reconciliation and the next budget and all the things we want to actually pass.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, it's all good.
All right. Representative Dan Crenshaw, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And This Week in Texas, we'll be right back. That does it for this episode of This Week in Texas. We certainly appreciate you joining us. As always, you can watch all of our previous episodes wherever you stream ABC 13 on demand, or you can go to abc13.com. Until we see you again, have a great week and be kind to one another.